The opinions expressed on the radio program by the hosts, co hosts, guests, and call in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions and responsibility of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Genesis Radio, www.genesisradio.com, Genesis Radio's owners, management, or affiliates.
It's another Thoughtful Thursday, and you're on the air with Reason for Reason, and I'm your host, Ronnie. You know, today is another one of those crazy, uniquely American days. You know, America, the entire country, is probably less than a third of the population and landmass for the earth. But what we do here has a ripple effect across the world. So today, Israel launched another attack. Not in Gaza. This time they're bombing the capital city of Syria, Damascus. But that's not what is leading in the mainstream media in this country. Nor are we talking about the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza or in Sudan, for that matter. That does not take precedence. What takes precedence in our media anyway is our president in full meltdown mode. And why? Why is the president so angry, so frustrated? And not just with the Democrats, which are his usual target. This time he's angry with his own base. And the reason he's so angry, Jeffrey Epstein, the convicted and possibly deceased pedophile. Now, when Trump ran for office, he talked about draining the swamp. He talked about exposing those who were involved in this cabal of sexual predators who were abusing young children, who were actually drinking their blood and all sorts of horrible acts committed against these children. Well, Trump, saying he's the law and order president, he was going to put a stop to that. He was going to end this cycle of abuse. All of those who were in any way involved were going to be brought to justice. He mentioned the Epstein files. Now, he's telling his supporters, forget Epstein and forget the files. Forget about the fact that I was the one who was the champion of this particular cause. Forget the fact that I told you I was going to get to the bottom of this, that I was going to bring justice to these people who did harm to these children. Now, well, not so much. He went as far as to call some of his staunchest supporters stupid people. So they were weaklings because they wanted to know the truth. Now, typically what happens is the president, who has no real relationship with truth or transparency or honesty, normally he tells a lie. And typically what happens is his followers, well, they don't question it. Nobody does any fact checking. In fact, fact checking under the Trump administration, the previous and current administration, fact checking is a horrible thing. In one of the last debates, J.D. Vance became upset with the moderator when they said, well, there's going to be some fact checking. He said, you agreed not to fact check me. Well, because of that, these guys just tell us lies. Some of them ridiculous lies. Case in point, not only is he having a meltdown about the Epstein files, which now basically are the non-existent Epstein files, he's also angry about the Fed chair. He wants him to lower interest rates. The chairman, Jerome Powell, has resisted thus far, in lowering interest rates. Trump has been antagonizing this man for months now. And Jerome Powell was kind of steadfast, like, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I'm not raising the interest rates. So today, Trump reverted to one of his old tactics: blame the Democrats. So today he said, I don't know why Biden appointed him and extended him. Well, before he can get the words out of his mouth, someone showed a ceremony where Donald J. Trump, in his first administration, is standing on the White House lawn appointing Jerome Powell as the new chairman of the Federal Reserve. Now, when Trump was running against Biden, they talked about Biden's mental capacity, that there was obviously some slippage there. And I would agree with that. Definitely, after looking at that debate he held against Trump, it was awful. Clearly, this was a man in a state of mental decline. Well, now you have a man that isn't much younger than Biden, who seems to have forgotten that he appointed the Fed treasurer, or the secretary of the Fed, or the Fed chairman, rather. How do you forget that? Then the same guy that said, I'm going to go after those pedophiles, they better watch out, there's a new sheriff in town. Now all of a sudden, it's a Democratic hoax. Which part is a hoax, Mr. President? Jeffrey Epstein was tried, convicted, and was in prison, or in jail on his way to prison. So was that a hoax? Jeffrey Epstein had a long and sordid history of abusing underage girls. Was that a hoax? Some people in your administration prosecuted Jeffrey Epstein. It happened under your watch. You seem to have forgotten that as well. But you say Biden was slipping. Are you slipping, Mr. President? Or is this just a way to try to deflect away from your problems, which are only going to get worse? Because realistically, these MAGA enthusiasts, these followers of yours that waited years for this information to be brought to light, do you think they're going to go away because you told them to? Do you think they're just going to say, oh, well, Trump says forget it, so we'll forget it? Even some of those people that are ride or die Trumpers are saying, hold on, Mr. President. I saw Alex Jones on TV saying, hey, Mr. President, you're not the king. You can't just tell us that these documents exist, that there is a list detailing what Epstein was involved in, and all of a sudden, it doesn't exist anymore. How about your Attorney General, Pam Bondi, who said the damn file was on her desk? Well, how did it go missing? What about the man you appointed to be in charge of the FBI, Kash Patel? He also said he's seen the Epstein file and how anxious he was to send agents to arrest those involved. Well, now there's not going to be any arrest. Nobody's going to jail for the horrors inflicted on these children. That doesn't matter anymore, Mr. President. We don't care about children in this country anymore. Well, let's be realistic. We don't. We stopped doing that years ago. After the first school shooting, and we did nothing. In fact, we made it easier for people to get their hands on assault weapons. So no, we don't care about kids in this country. Apparently what we do care about are the wealthy and powerful. Because let's be realistic. If there is such a list of those who were involved with Jeffrey Epstein, how many poor people do you think are going to be on this list? How many so-called illegal immigrants are going to be on this list? Probably none. Let's be realistic. This list ain't about poor people or working class people. This list, if it does exist, is a list of the wealthy and powerful in this country. Now, let's be realistic, and I'm speaking directly to the MAGA acolytes. Why is it that the man you chose to lead this country, why is it all of a sudden, after he promised you that he was going to turn this information over to you so you could see yourself who was involved, now all of a sudden he's trying to tell you, forget it, that Epstein is dead, that there's no need to dig any further, that you should just forget it. Why all of a sudden? TP.
Yeah. Okay, let me see what it's live.
So I don't get it. Why all of a sudden is he saying that we don't need to investigate anymore? We don't need to do any more digging to find out who's involved, who did what. Come on, folks, let's be realistic. So many pictures have surfaced of Trump standing right next to Jeffrey Epstein. Trump was on that damn private island. In fact, there is a lawsuit filed by a young girl against both Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump. That's a matter of record. You can go and pull the record and read it for yourself. For some reason, behavior that we said was creepy with Biden. Yeah, Biden was touchy-feely with women. Okay, won't argue that. But Trump talked about a girl on Escalade who was 10 years old and said, in 10 years, I'll be dating her. It's the same guy that said, grab women by the genitals. Yet, you think he was joking when he said those things? You know, this whole episode with the prostitute and paying her $130,000. You think he was donating to the Old Hole Association by giving her $130,000? Is that what you think? I know a lot of us don't want to accept reality, but it's staring you right in the face. The reason these files are not going to be made public is because there are a lot of people, wealthy, powerful, influential people, who cannot allow this information to see the day of light. And make no mistake about it. Our president is one such person. So he's going to be in meltdown mode for a while because he's got to find a way to deflect away from what's happening. Typically, when a president gets into trouble, typically what we do is suddenly there's a military campaign. Suddenly we need to bomb somewhere. Suddenly a threat has popped up somewhere on the globe and the US has to respond. So, folks, be alert. You heard it here first. When Bill Clinton was in trouble with Monica Lewinsky, all of a sudden we needed to bomb a factory in Africa, only to find out after we bombed and people lost and there was massive loss of life. Then we discovered, oops, it was an aspirin factory, and all they were making was aspirin. So don't be surprised if America suddenly finds itself into another conflict. And I opened the show. I think I mentioned the fact that Israel is bombing away in Damascus. Why? Is Hamas suddenly in Damascus? Why are we bombing away in Syria? Why are we still bombing away in Gaza? Why is Israel, the land that God allegedly gave these people because they are the chosen ones, at least that's what they say, why would they prevent aid from getting to those who are most affected? Why are they turning around the aid caravans? If the idea is to preserve life, why would you have these people starving? So is it possible that that may be a way out for Trump? That he could say, oh, our ally Israel is in trouble and we have to go, as we always do, put on our white American hat and go overseas and defend democracy? That's what we've called it, that we were defending democracy. We don't have democracy here in America. This man wants to end birthright citizenship. Isn't that in the Constitution? We have in the Constitution a due process clause, whether you are American born and raised or whether you're from another country. You're entitled to due process. That's what the Constitution says. That's not what our current administration says. Somebody like Stephen the Psychopath Miller is constantly railing about due process as if it's a burden. Now, of course, eventually what's going to happen is, like all psychopathic regimes, this one will come down too. And of course, this Stephen Miller, who's railing against due process, well, when he's about to go before the judge and face possible jail time, he's going to want due process. There won't be a question then if it is a right as an American. He'll be asking for it, but he doesn't want to hear it right now when working class people are being rounded up. ICE just shows up, faces covered. Isn't that what the Ku Klux Klan used to do? Just show up with their faces covered, abuse people, take them away. Isn't that what happened to Emmett Till? Taken away in the middle of the night? Now there's reports that some of these people, these so-called illegal immigrants, bodies have washed up. Some of them still shackled. How is that possible in America, the land of democratic freedoms? Something is wrong, folks. And I know there is a segment of our population that cannot see the wrong. All they could see is that everything is fine. They live in a state called denial. You know, when Donald Trump first decided or announced that he was going to run for president, he said his stated goal was to make America great again. First of all, let's be clear. That was not Donald Trump's slogan. I know he's marketed the hats, the shirts, and everything else, but it wasn't his idea. If you go back, Ronald Reagan used that slogan back in 1980 or leading up to the election in 1980, more than 40 years ago. Trump, of course, like with everything else, capitalized on it. Well, he said that he was going to make this country great again. Well, Trump was in office from 2017 to 2021. Was America great? Were all our domestic as well as international problems solved? Had we figured out how to live together in this country? There's only one race, the human race. And yes, the human race is subdivided into, different shapes, sizes, and colors. But had we even figured out how to solve that issue here? Yet we're going around the world solving problems for countries like Israel. We just bombed in Iran. What interest does America have in Iran? What do we benefit by bombing? And now it is stated that there is a bounty on the head of Donald Trump. I think someone said $40 million posted by the Iranians. Well, why would Donald Trump bomb Iran based solely on the word of Benjamin Netanyahu? Here's a guy that has been going around for the last 30 plus years talking about or expressing his desire to bomb the country of Iran. What threat does Iran pose to this country? We keep being told that the major economic threat to America is China. Or militarily, China and Russia. But we don't mention Iran in either of those categories as an economic or as a military threat. Yet we bomb them. That pretty much tells me that it is well known in Israeli circles as well as in this country by our intelligence gathering agencies that Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon. If they did have a nuke, ain't no way in hell we'd be in there bombing. Why haven't we bombed in North Korea? Why haven't we bombed in places like Pakistan, India? Back in the early days of the Cold War, there was a term known as détente or nuclear détente. Basically, what détente signified was, well, we have the ability to destroy this planet 10 times over. And our Soviet counterparts also had that very same capability. So you reach a stalemate at détente, where either side said, listen, we don't want to be the one to start this war that will end humanity as we know it. Well, that's why we have not went rushing into North Korea. We talk about, remember, Little Rocket Man and how he better do this and how he better do that. Well, Little Rocket Man said, to hell with you. What are you going to do? And Little Rocket Man is still there in North Korea, still running that country. In fact, not long ago, Trump reached out to the North Korean leader and wanted to talk to him. It's reported that the North Korean leader said, "Thank you, but no thank you. We ain't got nothing to talk about." The rest of the world has been paying attention. All of the people that worked with America, well, America paid them back about the same way they paid back the Native Americans who helped the Pilgrims deal with the harsh winters. Taught them how to get food, how to get shelter, how to survive these harsh winters in the Northeast. Well, they paid them back with slaughter, with subjugation, with rape, with murder. Well, today, instead of using muskets, we use stealth bombers. That's what we did to Iraq. Remember when Saddam Hussein was our friend? Remember when he went to war with Iran at the behest of the United States? All of a sudden, Saddam became the bad guy. Does anybody remember that Iraq was a stable nation under Saddam Hussein? Well, Saddam is gone now, and the country is in a state of political, social, and economic chaos. In Libya, Muammar Gaddafi had been in control of that country for well over 40 years. When he took office, barely a fifth of the people in the country could read and write. Years later, illiteracy had been all but eradicated. Education was stressed. He was building one of the highest standards of living throughout Africa. All of a sudden, he became the bad guy. He had to go. Why? Muammar Gaddafi wanted to adopt his own gold-backed currency, which was a direct threat to the U.S. dollar and U.S. economic hegemony. Well, of course, our friend Saddam, our friend Muammar, they had to be eliminated. And now we're talking regime change in Iran. We don't like the Ayatollah. Somehow we like Netanyahu, that is slaughtering innocent women and children, that is bombing indiscriminately in Gaza, bombing in Lebanon, bombing in Syria. No end in sight. He's our friend. Those folks who are just struggling to get by, just to live day to day, somehow they're the enemy. What happened to America that fought against tyranny? That said to the British, enough is enough? That stood up to the most powerful empire on the planet and won their independence? Somehow we've forgotten that. Maybe we need to go back and look at what happened to Germany under Adolf Hitler. We sent millions of America's sons and daughters off to Europe, another European conflict that America wanted desperately to stay out of. But in order to save the world from fascism, from authoritarianism, America's sons and daughters went off to fight and die. And hundreds of thousands of them gave their lives. And now, 80 plus years later, America, the land of the free and the home of the brave, is building newfangled concentration camps. And we give them these real nice names like Alligator Alcatraz. It is now Americans that are rounding up people. The Nazis used to build these concentration camps along rail lines. Well, that was a mode of transportation during that time, the most efficient anyway. Today, we're building places like Alligator, Alcatraz next to airports. So what we can do is, and there was I think it was maybe actually it was the governor of Florida, another psychopath. He said, now we just have to take them a few hundred yards and put them on a plane to get them out of the country. I think, Mr. Governor, you missed a step. Typically, when you want to deport someone, you go for a deportation hearing. But he said, marched him over just a few hundred yards and put him on a plane. You know, for Adolf Hitler, the first few years of his administration went surprisingly well. Germany had been in a state of near total economic collapse. German pride was unheard of. Germany, which was an economic miracle after World War I, or leading up to World War I, it was World War I that put them in this mess with all the reparations they had to pay. Well, all of a sudden, with help from people right here in this country, a number of wealthy and powerful American families contributed to Nazism, to Hitler. I mean, let's be realistic. Adolf Hitler was Man of the Year for Time magazine in 1938. By that time, the Holocaust had already begun. The Nuremberg laws went into effect 3 years early in 1935. Well, for Hitler, things got off to a pretty good start. He was successful. He was able to annex certain countries, take others without firing a shot. But then he decided to take Poland. From Poland, he took France, several Scandinavian countries. What led to Hitler's downfall was when he opened up a two-front war and decided to invade the huge country that was the Soviet Union, or huge nations that comprised the Soviet Union. That led to Hitler's ultimate downfall. What's going to bring down Donald Trump? I think we are beginning to see some of the chinks in the armor. This whole debacle with Epstein is not going away. And the way he's handling it, his usual playbook of telling a lie, that's not going to work. You know, for those who have ever studied as, say, a 5% or as a Muslim, Nation of Islam, one of the lessons talks about when dissatisfaction reaches 100%, the tide against Trump is beginning to rise. Trump never thought that the people that elected him, that basically worship the ground he walks on, he didn't think they would ever turn on him. He said when he was running for office the first time, he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and not lose a vote. And at that time, he was probably correct. Well, Donald, things have changed now. You opened up a can of worms. You opened your mouth and talked about exposing Epstein and everyone involved. You never thought that people would remember what you said and actually challenge you on it. And now the MAGA folks are calling you out. They want answers. And not just that, you said you were going to make this country great again. Well, let's talk about the greatness that we've achieved so far. Trump has been in office just shy of 7 months. And how great have we gotten in the last 7 months? Trump's presidency got off to a bang. Does anybody remember a plane and a helicopter head-on collision just outside DC? Is anyone paying attention to the wild weather that claimed more than 100 lives in Texas just the other day? And the weather is continuing on a destructive path. Anybody listening from New York, did you see what happened in the subways the other day? Thousands of gallons of water running down like a waterfall into the subway. The trains themselves, 3 to 4 inches of water on the floor of the train, and it was continuing to rise. No place for the water to go, and that wasn't even a full day's rain. Folks, when that happens, that's a warning of things to come. But when you have a leader that refuses to bow down, when you have a leader that says he is in charge of a superpower, what superpower? This is a Judeo-Christian country. Isn't God the only superpower in the universe? Apparently, others disagree, like Trump. He thinks he's leading a superpower. He thinks he can do whatever he wants to do. Well, he won't be the first. He may be the last for this country, but he's not the first. We just talked about Adolf Hitler and what happened to him. What happened to the Greeks, the Romans, even the British. The sun never set on the British Empire. They controlled this country, Canada, parts of Africa, Asia, India. They basically had control of most of the known world. What does the UK have left? Northern Ireland, Scotland, and a few territories in the Caribbean. And yes, there are some countries in Africa that still use the British pound as their rate of exchange or for their monetary system. But the British Empire is a shell of itself. All of these empires that fall, they fall from within. And America is no different. America's on its last legs. And let's think, if you have a leak in your house, if you're going to get someone to fix it, you should probably get a reputable plumber. Someone that has a track record of doing repairs, a full honest day's work, and charges a fair price. Okay. If you have an economy that is slipping and has been slipping for decades, why would you go get somebody who's never ran a successful business to run that economy? If you can't run Trump Airways, if you can't run Trump University, if you can't run Trump Taj Mahal, how the hell are you going to run this country? But of course, I know immediately what people are thinking is, oh, but what about Biden? Yeah, what about him? Here's the problem with Biden. Even if you say Biden was the worst thing that happened to this country, and let's say for argument's sake, I agree with you. The problem you have is time. Time moves in one direction, and that's forward. It's too late to go back and reverse the 2020 election. Too late for that. All we can deal with is now and tomorrow. And what is tomorrow going to bring for a lot of Trump supporters? Has anybody in MAGA camp taken a close look at this bill and what it's going to do to poor and working class families? I was looking at a clip from a congressional hearing the other day. And there's a Senator Gomez, I think from California. Don't quote me, I'm not 100% sure. But he was questioning one of Trump's economic officials. And he asked the question, are these numbers accurate in this bill? I thought it was a mistake. And the official said, no, there's no mistakes. What you see is accurate. According to what's in the bill, if you make $15,000 or less, your effective tax rate over the life of this bill will increase 74.3%. Don't take my word for it. Go read the bill. It's in black and white. In other words, folks, your effective tax rate is going to increase by 75%. Just imagine what your paycheck will look at after a week or 2 weeks with a tax rate of 75% and you're only making $15,000. For those making $30,000, they get a break. Their tax rate will only increase by 20.6%. Essentially a 21% increase. Well, wait a minute. Didn't Trump say taxes were going to go down? That he was going to keep taxes low? Didn't he say that Kamala Harris was going to be the one that was going to raise your taxes? But I know Kamala was bad. The Democrats are bad. The Republicans, well, they're the good guys. They're the ones who are fiscally responsible. Well, according to current projections, over the next 10 years, under this economic bill that was just signed, the big BS bill, the current deficit, which stands at $37 trillion, will increase more than $20 trillion. So that means for generations to come, these young people that are in high school and college now, junior high school, they're going to enter into a job market where they're going to be responsible for nearly $60 trillion of debt that they had nothing to do with creating. Donald Trump will by that time be nearly 90 years old if he lives that long. He hasn't paid taxes in years anyway. He doesn't care. For the top 1%, they're getting a $4 trillion tax break. So that means corporations like Amazon, like Elon Musk, Starlink, and other companies he's owned, they will get a tax refund, a nice fat check. For the people that work the hardest, that bust their pumps every day, what are you going to get? You know, folks, you got to stop burying your head in the sand. You've got to take a few minutes away from things like Fox News and do a little research. Some of you can probably actually still read. Google some things. Open up a book. Open up your mind. Don't just follow blindly. because that's what led to the destruction of Nazi Germany. They took an oath to Adolf Hitler, not to Germany, not to the German people. They took an oath to one man, one deeply flawed, very, very sick individual. And in America, we ain't far away from that. What Trump demands is loyalty. Not loyalty to this country, not loyalty to constituents, loyalty to him. And that's why we have an administration loaded with people who are cut above a retard. Yes, I said a retard. I know it's not, what's the word, politically correct. Well, I'm not a damn politician. And when I grew up, that was a term that was used. So today you want to use other terms to describe the same sort of condition. You want to pretty it up. Well, that's going to help a lot. Anyway, the people that are surrounding Trump are a bunch of maniacs and yes people. Nobody says to him, Mr. President, I don't think that's a good idea. Just think. Just think, people in rural America where a hospital could be 5, 10, 20, 30, 100 miles away, and that's their only means of health care. What's going to happen when these cuts go into effect? What happens to your ability to see a doctor, to get much needed treatment? For folks that have chronic illnesses like diabetes, who constantly need medicines, prescriptions filled, visits to doctors, what are you going to do when the doctor has to go out of business because there's no more reimbursement coming in, or very limited reimbursement? For those folks in this country that are surviving with assistance from the government in the form of things like SNAP and other supplemental programs, what are you going to do when that ends? How do you feed your family? You know, let's be realistic. Donald Trump said we're going to make America great again. Aren't we great now? Let's be realistic. This country, isn't it great right now? People are barely getting by, struggling day to day just to make ends meet. But that's greatness, isn't it? Donald Trump told the American people, you're just going to have to be patient because it's not as easy as I thought to bring down prices. He's not even talking about it anymore. He took a $400 million plane from Qatar and wants the American taxpayers to foot the bill to retrofit that plane so he can fly in comfort. Some of you may never, ever get on the plane, simply can't afford a ticket. But he wants you to pay to retrofit his plane so he can travel in luxury. You're being patient, and he is getting luxury and gifts that violate the Constitution. He said only suckers wouldn't take a gift like that. Well, what gift are the American people getting? Some people might say shafted, paying for this man so that he can go around the world and collect debts that he thinks are owed to him. The first trip he took, he went to Saudi Arabia. Why? Because he wants to do business with the Saudis. He wants his family to build resorts in Saudi Arabia and in the UAE. How's that going to benefit poor and working class people in this country? You got to think, folks. This man is in it to win it, but not for you, for him. We're going to see, we know what brought down Adolf Hitler, a two-front war. But with Trump, what's going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back? What's going to be the one issue that even his MAGA base cannot abide? What's going to cause him to be knocked off his throne? That day, folks, is coming. I know there's still some of you that will support this man, just like Hitler was supported right up to the end. You know, as the Russians were closing in on Berlin from the east and allies from the west, there were still people who said, we have faith in Adolf Hitler. Even after Hitler had reportedly committed suicide, he and Eva Braun, there were still people that believed that Hitler was going to rise up from the ground, be resurrected, and come back and save Germany. For decades after World War II, there were still staunch Nazis hiding out in places like Brazil, Argentina, all over Central America, in South America, still with that Nazi ideology. Well, guess what? Some of them were hiding right here in this country. Some of them, the U.S. government, bought them here. Yes, let me say that again. Some of these, the worst of the worst, those that sentenced hundreds of people to their death, sent them to their death. Folks like Klaus Barbie, brought to this country with the consent of the U.S. government. Other Nazis, well, they don't call themselves Nazis. That wouldn't be proper, but they act like them. And if you can't see that Donald Trump is behaving like a Nazi, it's because you don't want to see it. You don't want to accept reality. So, folks, it's unfortunate that we have to spend so much time talking about a president melting down. We're not talking about Israel. And that's the real threat. Israel bombing away in Damascus. Netanyahu was just here last Monday. Do you think he was here just to hang out, have a drink with Trump, and go back home? He came here for weapons. He came here for money. He came here to let Trump know that the next target was, they have a plan that has been in the works for years for greater Israel, to incorporate all these countries that they've been bombing into greater Israel. Just like Hitler said we needed Lebensraum, or living space, well, now this new Nazi, or the Fourth Reich, is asking or taking the same thing, living space, so that more Israeli settlements can be built. More people can die. As Netanyahu would say, because they were terrorists and because they pose a threat to Israel's existence. Folks, that's a lie. He and Trump, these guys are liars. I guess liars in arms, you know. I guess the only good thing is that these guys are aging rapidly. And, you know, they talk about Biden, how old he was. Well, Trump isn't much younger. And Netanyahu, he's not too far behind. Remember the show the HBO series, The Game of Thrones. Well, folks, this is the Game of Bones because all these dudes are old. And all of them are heading to rotting in the grave. Then perhaps we'll have a new regime that will emerge. One that is going to be fair, open, and transparent with everybody and not just the rich and powerful. Everybody deserves respect. Whether you're the janitor or whether you're the CEO, everybody deserves a degree of respect. So with that, folks, I'm going to bid you a good night and a good weekend. And I'm going to ask those of you that are listening, don't just take my word for it. Go and fact check. Go and fact check me, please. And if I said anything wrong, email me. Right on the show, you can send comments right on Facebook, and I will answer every single one of them. I have no problem with debating. Have no problem answering questions. What I do ask is if you're going to provide a comment, let it be intelligent comments, not just, oh, what about Biden? Let's put some thought into it. So, folks, with that, I hope you have a good weekend. And I will see you again back here next Thursday for another Thoughtful Thursday. Peace.